Hello, dear listeners. This is your host, Michelle, and you're tuned into another episode of Useless Information, the podcast where we dive into the fascinating corners of knowledge that might not be useful in everyday life, but sure is interesting. Today, we're heading to the top of the world, Mount Everest. Yes, that's right. The tallest peak on Earth, standing proud at 29,031 feet above sea level, and it has some tales to tell. But first, let's get a word from our sponsor.
Do you like to read episodic fiction? If you do, welcome to the story of Tommy and Josie on Amazon's Kindle Vella. Tommy is somewhat lost after breaking up with Claire, but he meets Josie, a waitress at a local diner. Bonding over music and adventure, they connect intimately over a weekend. Their romance is fleeting, but they realize their connection transcends time and distance. Will their whirlwind romance become a lifetime of love or fade away like a passing breeze? The Weekend is a heartwarming tale by HQ, exploring chance encounters and enduring love. Be swept away by the whirlwind romance of Tommy and Josie. Learn more at the HQ website at www.itchque.com. Sunray Multimedia sponsored this ad.
As a starting point, Mount Everest wasn't always known by that name. Locally in Nepal, it is called Sagarmatha, meaning skyhead, and in Tibet, it's known as Chumolunga Ma. I am butchering that. That's fine. Or Goddess Mother of the World. It wasn't until 1856 that the English named it after Sir George Everest, a surveyor general of India. The first attempt to summit Mount Everest was in 1924 by George Mallory and Andrew Irvine. The mission ended in tragedy when both men disappeared on the mountain. Whether they reached the summit or not remains a mystery. The first successful summit wasn't until 29 years later in 1953 by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Now, climbing Everest is no easy feat. It's deadly. More than 300 deaths have occurred. This includes experienced climbers, Sherpas, and novice alike. The causes include falls, avalanches, altitude sickness, and exposure. And as grim as it sounds, many of the bodies of those who've perished are still up there. They're still up on Mount Everest. Why? Because recovery is hazardous and sometimes virtually impossible. There is a death zone above 8,000 meters where the oxygen is so thin that it can no longer sustain human life. Over time, when climbers remain at that altitude without any oxygen, they will become weak. They will suffer from cognitive impairment. They will lose their vision and eventually die. Perhaps one of the deadliest days in Everest's history was May 10th, 1996, when 8 climbers were caught in a storm and died. This tragic event was later depicted in a best-selling book, Into Thin Air, which offers a detailed first-hand account of what happened. But then there's also avalanches. Avalanches are another common cause of death. In 2014, 16 Sherpas lost their lives when an ice mass caved from the western CWM, creating an enormous avalanche. The incident prompted a massive walkout by Sherpa climbers, drawing attention to the risks Sherpas endure and their essential role in Everest climbs. Then there's the eerie phenomenon of bodies serving as waypoints along the route. The body of Green Boots, who is presumably Tezwang Paljor, but he died in 1996 and has become a landmark for climbers to the summit. Then there's Sleeping Beauty, who tragically died during a descent after refusing to leave without her husband, who had gone missing. These bodies remained on Everest for years until efforts were made to move them out of sight or cover them. Climbers also face hazards from exposure, exhaustion, frostbite, and even the perils of descending after reaching the summit. While reaching the summit is often celebrated as a climactic moment, the descent is where many fatalities occur. Exhausted, mentally and physically drained, climbers must then navigate the perilous journey back down. These stories are not to deter the brave souls who dream to conquer Everest, but to underline the respect and preparation this mammoth mountain demands. For all its grandeur, Mount Everest is a reminder of nature's raw and sometimes perilous power. But But one of the stranger facts about Everest is that it is increasing in height. Yep, you heard that right. That's what I'm saying. In 2020, China and Nepal agreed that Everest is 2 feet taller than previously thought due to shifting tectonic plates. The mountain has had a profound effect on the weather as well. It's so high it reaches into the jet stream. This has caused extremely high winds, drastic temperature drops, and sudden storms, making the climb even more perilous. Here's some cool and interesting facts about Mount Everest. 1. Everest grows by 1/4 of an inch every year due to the geologic uplift. 2. The wind can blow over 200 miles per hour at the summit. 3. In 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay were the first confirmed climbers to reach the summit of Mount Everest. 4. Everest is not the world's tallest mountain if measured from base to summit. That title belongs to Mauna Kea in Hawaii, but which most of that is underwater. 5. In 1975, Juniko Tebe from Japan became the first woman to reach the summit. 6. The youngest person to reach the summit was 13-year-old Jordan Romero from the United States in 2010. Probably those good lungs, right? Young lungs. 7. Chikiro Morera of Japan, who was 80 years old when he made the ascent in 2013, is the oldest person to have climbed to the top of Everest. 8. The death zone above 8,000 meters is also named because of the high risk of death. The human body cannot acclimate to the lack of oxygen at that height. 9. Dead bodies on Mount Everest serve as grim reminders of the risk involved in climbing it. 10. Babu Chiro Sherpa holds the record for the longest time spent on the summit. He stayed there for 21 hours in 1999. 11. The summit of Mount Everest has about 1/3 the air pressure that the sea level does, which significantly reduces the amount of oxygen absorbed by each breath. 12. The first known people to summit Mount Everest in winter were a team of Polish climbers on February 17, 1980. But remember, each of these facts hold the story of a human endurance, significant marvel, or the sheer power of nature, making the tale of Mount Everest even more intriguing. So there you have it, a bird's eye view of the magnificent and formidable Mount Everest. Not your average holiday destination, that's for sure. Would you be interested in scaling Mount Everest, knowing that this could be the last thing you ever do? Or do you think you could beat the odds, get to the top, and make it back down to tell the tale? Me personally, I don't even like walking up a hill, let alone a mountain of any height. Not my cup of tea. But I'm in awe of those who did attempt it, those who succeeded, and those who gave their precious lives for it. That's amazing. But if you like what you're hearing in the Useless Information Podcast, please take the time to hit the follow or subscribe button so you're kept up to date when another episode goes live. And if you like what you hear, do me a favor and leave a review if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever major platform you're on. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Your follow, subscribe, or review lets me know and let the podcast guys know. Hell yeah, I'm picking up what Michelle is putting down. I'm also in the process of expanding this podcast to Twitter, so stay tuned for that announcement. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you next time for more fascinating and seamlessly useless information. But as always, I'm grateful for your listenership, and I thank you for being a part of the Useless Information crew. Today and always, until next time, be well, stay safe, and give love.
This podcast has been produced by Sunray Multimedia and Michelle Carey. Music by CreatorMix.com. The YouTube audio library and editing by Descript.